My daughter held up the most precious thing my family has ever owned, in front of a room full of her rich new friends, and she called it a filthy old rug. "Just throw it out, Dad," she said, and she laughed a little so her friend would know it was okay to laugh too. "It's embarrassing." So I carried it outside to the trash cans with my own two hands. 57 years old, in my good shirt, setting my great-great-grandmother's work down next to the garbage because my daughter was ashamed of it. And that is exactly where a woman I had never met in my life caught my arm and stopped me, because she recognized what my own daughter could not. A museum had been searching for that filthy old rug for 40 years. My name is Daniel Ness. I'm 57 years old. I am dying Navajo. I grew up near Window Rock, and I've spent 35 years as a welder, most of them in Flagstaff, building the bones of things other people get the credit for. Bridges, buildings, water towers. I work with my hands, and I don't talk much, and I've never needed anyone to think I was important. My grandmother raised me to believe that the loudest thing about a man should be his work, and the quietest thing should be his worth. I've tried to live like that. The thing my daughter called a filthy old rug is a wearing blanket. A first-phase Chiefs blanket woven by my great-great-grandmother more than 150 years ago from wool she spun and dyed herself. It has passed down through the women of my family, hand to hand, for 5 generations. When my mother died, it came to me because I was the one who'd sat on the floor as a boy and watched my grandmother card wool, and I was the one who understood what it was. It is not a rug. You do not put on a floor. It is the single most valuable thing my family has ever held. And I don't mean the money, though we'll get to the money. Before I tell you what happened at that party, do me one small kindness. If anyone has ever made you feel ashamed of where you come from, tap subscribe. It's free, and it tells me this story found the right person. And stay to the end, because I'm going to ask you something I still can't answer. And I want to know how you'd have called it. Let me tell you about my daughter, Ashley. She's 31. I love her. I need you to hear that first, because the rest is hard. Ashley was a beautiful, bright girl, and somewhere along the way she decided that the life I gave her wasn't enough, that Flagstaff and a welder father and a grandmother who spoke Navajo were things to climb up and away from. She went to college, she married a man named Brett whose family has real money, and she moved into a world of big houses and country clubs and people who ask what you do before they ask your name. And in that world, she quietly filed away the parts of herself that didn't fit. Including me, including where she came from. She started introducing me as my dad. He's in construction, which isn't a lie, exactly, but isn't the truth either. She stopped mentioning the reservation. When her daughter, my granddaughter, Lily, who is 6 and the light of my life, asked one time about the Navajo stuff, I watched Ashley change the subject like she'd smelled smoke. My daughter had decided that our heritage was a stain to be managed. And I let it hurt me quietly, the way I've let most things hurt me, and I kept showing up because that's what a father does. Then Ashley and Brett bought their new house. A big one, in a gated part of Scottsdale, with a circular driveway and a lawn that has no business existing in the desert. And they threw a housewarming party. And I decided, God help me, I decided that this was the moment to give her the blanket. Because that's what it's for. In my family, when a woman built a new home, the blanket came to bless it. My grandmother brought it to my mother's first house. My mother brought it to mine. It is the oldest way we have of saying, you carry all of us with you now. I thought in my quiet, hopeful, foolish way that if I brought Ashley the most sacred thing we own, laid it in her hands in her new home, she might finally understand that where she came from was not a stain. It was a treasure. I thought the blanket might do what all my words never could. So I wrapped it careful, and I drove 2 hours down from Flagstaff in my good shirt, and I walked into my daughter's housewarming party. It was a beautiful party. 40, 50 people, catered, everyone in clothes that cost more than my truck payment. And I stood a little off to the side the way I do, holding my wrapped bundle, waiting for a moment. And when there was a lull, I went to Ashley, and I told her I had something for the new house. Something important. And a few of her friends drifted over, curious, smiling, drinks in hand. I unwrapped the blanket and I held it out to her. And I watched my daughter's face do the worst thing I have ever seen a face do. She looked at that old, hand-woven, irreplaceable blanket, brown and cream and faded indigo, soft with a century and a half of being loved. And she saw, in front of her rich friends, an old worn rug. She saw the reservation. She saw the things she'd spent her whole adult life climbing away from, being handed to her in her beautiful new house by her welder father in his good shirt. And she was mortified. "Oh, Dad." She gave a little laugh, the kind that's really an apology to everyone else in the room. "What is that? It's kind of dirty, isn't it?" One of her friends said something about it being very ethnic, and a couple of them laughed, and Ashley laughed with them, and I felt the floor of my life drop about a foot. I said quietly, "Ashley, this is your great-great-grandmother's. It's a chief's blanket. It's for the new home." And my daughter, in front of all those people, said the thing I will hear for the rest of my life. She waved her hand at it like it was something that crawled in from the yard, and she said, "Dad, honestly, just throw that filthy old rug out. It's embarrassing. Put it in the trash. I'll get you a real housewarming gift another time. Throw that filthy old rug out." If you're still with me, do me that kindness and tap subscribe before I tell you what happened next. Because what happened next is the reason I believe, still, that some things are protected by something bigger than us. I didn't argue. That's not who I am. I've never in my life begged anyone to see the worth of something I love. You shouldn't have to. So I just nodded, and I wrapped the blanket back up in its cloth, and I turned to carry it out to my truck. But Ashley, already turning back to her friend, said, "No, Dad, just put it in the bins outside. I don't want it in the house." And I understood she needed it gone. She needed the thing that shamed her out of her beautiful new home entirely. So I carried my great-great-grandmother's hands out to the trash cans by the side of the garage. And I stood there for a second in the dark, holding 150 years of my family, trying to decide if I could really set it down among the garbage bags. I don't think I could have, but I never had to find out. Because a voice behind me said, "Sir, please don't put that down." I turned around. There was a woman there, maybe 70, silver hair, one of the party guests. I noticed her earlier because she was the only person there who'd looked at me kindly. She was staring at the blanket in my arms, like a person seeing something they dreamed about. Her hands were actually shaking. She said, "Sir, forgive me. My name is Eleanor Whitfield. I'm a textile historian. I've spent my career on dye weaving. And I've been standing across that room for 10 minutes, trying to convince myself I wasn't seeing what I thought I was seeing." She looked up at me. "May I ask, how did you come to have this?" And I told her, "My great-great-grandmother wove it. It's come down through my family for 5 generations." And Eleanor Whitfield put her hand over her mouth, and when she took it away, her eyes were wet, and she said the words that turned that whole night inside out. "Mr. Ness, I believe this is the BIA blanket, a first-phase chief blanket that was documented in a photograph in 1911 and then vanished from the record. Museums and scholars have been trying to locate it for 40 years. It's in the textbooks I teach from as lost." She looked at it again like she couldn't help it. "If it's authentic, and I would stake my career that it is one of perhaps 50 in the world, and it belongs in a museum, and it is worth, Mr. Nez, at auction, a blanket far less significant than this sold for $1.5 million. I stood there by my daughter's trash cans, holding $1.5 million that I had just been ordered to throw away because it was embarrassing. Now, I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment, because it wasn't what you'd think. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't even about the money. I promise you, standing there, the money was the smallest part of it. What I felt was my grandmother. I felt every woman in my family who had spun and carried and protected that blanket for 150 years through poverty, through everything this country did to us, refusing to sell it, refusing to let it go, keeping it safe hand to hand so that it could come down to me and I could be told to put it in the garbage by my own child. What I felt was the terrible, holy weight of how close it had come. Eleanor asked, gently, if she might tell the hosts what they had. And I said yes. Because part of me, I'll admit it, needed my daughter to know. We walked back inside, the two of us, and Eleanor Whitfield, who it turned out was rather well known in that world, which is why the Callahans had been thrilled to have her, quieted the room, and she told them. She told all of Ashley's beautiful friends exactly what the filthy old rug was. The lost BIAA blanket. 40 years missing. A national treasure. Woven by the great-great-grandmother of the quiet man in the good shirt they'd just watched be humiliated. And she said, and I'll never forget it, in my entire career I have never held anything like it. You are in the presence of something extraordinary. I hope you understand that. And I watched my daughter's face, in front of all those people, go from confusion to understanding to a shade of horror I have never seen on her before. Because Ashley finally saw it. Not the blanket. She still couldn't really see the blanket. She saw what she'd done. She'd stood in her beautiful new house and called a national treasure filthy garbage and ordered her father to throw away 5 generations of his family to impress a room of people who were now looking at him with awe and at her with something else entirely. Now let me tell you how it ended, because the ending is the part one actually care about. Brett, my son-in-law, to his credit, was decent about it. He was mostly just stunned. And Ashley, once the shock wore off, wanted to talk about it constantly. Suddenly, she was very interested in her heritage. Suddenly, she wanted to tell people the story. Suddenly, the blanket was our family's incredible treasure. And there were, I noticed, a number of conversations that drifted toward what it was worth and whether we should sell it and how that money might help the whole family. And that's when I understood that my daughter still couldn't see it. She'd only swapped one blindness for another. Before, the blanket was worthless because it looked poor. Now it was precious because it was worth a fortune. She still couldn't see the actual thing, my grandmother's hands, the wool, the years, the love. She could only ever see the price tag, whether it read 0 or $1.5 million. And that, more than the party, is what broke my heart. So I made my decision, and I made it alone the way my grandmother would have. I did not sell it. A private collector offered me, through Eleanor, more money than I have made in my entire life. I turned it down, because my great-great-grandmother did not spin that wool so it could end up on the wall of a rich man's vacation house as an investment. Instead, I placed it with the museum, on my family's terms, with our name on it, with our story told right, where it will be cared for forever, and where any child of ours for the next 200 years can walk in and stand in front of it and know. This is who we are, and it was never, ever something to be ashamed of. The museum was gracious. There's a plaque. It uses my grandmother's name. Ashley was upset that I didn't sell it. Of course she was. And I told her the truth, that the blanket was never mine to turn into money, that I was only ever its keeper, the way her great-great-grandmother was, and the way I had hoped, once, that she might be. I told her the door was open, that I would teach her everything my grandmother taught me, anytime she wanted, for free. She hasn't taken me up on it. She's still angry, still a little embarrassed, in a new way now. But here's the part that lets me sleep. My granddaughter, Lily, is 6, and Lily came with me to the museum to see the blanket in its case, and she pressed her hands and her nose against the glass, and she said, "Grandpa, my great-great-great-grandma made that." And I said yes. And she stood up as tall as a 6-year-old can stand, and she was not embarrassed. She was proud. The pride skipped a generation, maybe, but it didn't die. I take Lily to see it every few months, and I'm teaching her the things my grandmother taught me. And one day, when she's grown and building her own home, there's going to be a lot of our story waiting for her, and she's going to know exactly what it's worth. All of what it's worth. My grandmother taught me, when I was a boy watching her weave, that in every real blanket there's a single thread that runs off the edge of the pattern, a small deliberate imperfection, a way out, so the weaver's spirit isn't trapped inside the work forever. She told me nothing of real worth is ever perfect or clean or new. The worth is in the hands that made it, and the years that carried it, and the love woven through the flaws. She told me the people who can only see the surface of a thing will spend their whole lives poor no matter how much money they have, because they'll throw away the treasure and keep the price tag every single time. My daughter looked at that blanket and saw dirt. A stranger looked at it and saw a miracle. And the whole distance between those two women is the distance between everything my grandmother gave me and everything my daughter gave away. She told me to throw out the filthy old rug. It's in a museum now, behind glass, with our name on it. and 40 years of scholars who'd have given anything to find it walk past my grandmother's name every day. So here's my question, and I mean it because I go back and forth. I turned down more money than I've ever seen and gave the blanket to a museum instead of selling it and setting up my family, my granddaughter, for life. Was I right to choose the honor of it over the security it could have bought them? Or does a man owe his blood to fortune in his hands, even when they didn't understand it? Tell me down in the comments. I made my choice standing by those trash cans, but I'm still not sure it was the only one. If this story meant something to you, do me that kindness, subscribe, hit like, and go look again at the plain, worn, unglamorous things somebody in your family kept for a reason. It might be the most valuable thing you'll ever hold. It almost always is. I'll see you next time.